Game of Thrones, the rage of spreading flames. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want to support us and get VIP access to exclusive content, our Ko-Fi is waiting for you. Chapter 126 Presbyterian Church. In this way, under Leonor's persecution, Monka Jesse half-spokenly spoke out many marginal people from the Seven Gods Church. After getting enough lists, Leonor immediately put Agsy under house arrest and asked Vincent to arrest him according to the list. It was wrong. It should be a hiring person. Those who were excluded by the church by nature and ability were invited to the Red Castle for various reasons and then held secret meetings. Dear priests and maids, as you see, I am Leonor Baratheon. I invite you here today to announce something to you. I have obtained the Seven Gods. Leonor was wearing a simple white robe and a crown on his head, and he was straight to the point of being a monk and nun of all kinds, facing the direct confession of His Majesty the King. All the monks and nuns were stunned, and then looked at each other, each unknown. The church is already dirty. The Seven Gods gave me guidance to remove the Archbishop and Archbishop of the church today and reorganize the church. Leonor opened his hands and looked compassionate. I am here to ask everyone agree, please help me rectify the church. His Majesty the King's money is not enough. The kingdom intends to take action against the church. Thoughts flashed through each monk and nun's heads one after another, and they were stunned and didn't know what to do. Don't you want to help me and not let the Seven Gods be glorified? Leonor frowned a little. This script is not like this, Your Majesty. How do you want us to help you? Are you going to be the blessing of God's world? Baylor a bald monk stood up and asked. These guys who are excluded from the edge of the church are very rational, but I am not going to be the blessing of God, but I want to be the blessing of God. Leonor yes, I am Leonor who is revealed by God. Leonor replied in a vague way. Baylor also known as Beller, blessed by God, was the 9th king of the Targaryen dynasty. He was known for his piety and had done many ridiculous things, such as hatching dragon eggs with prayers, walked barefoot to Dorne to negotiate peace, appointed a little boy to become the archbishop, and so on. What Baylor did was a bit ridiculous, but some achieved unexpected results. Moreover, he maintained the Targaryen dynasty's suppression of the church, and even appointed and removed the archbishop at will. It was not a false to say that he wanted to be him. You must help me innovate the church, remove the current bishops, and incorporate all the church's cathedrals into the jurisdiction of the kingdom to truly benefit the people. Leonor directly expressed his request, but only gave it a title. The Seven Gods revealed his name to revolutionize the religion. Well, now all the monks and nuns started to discuss it. They could understand it when they said it, but now they don't know how to make a decision. Dear priests and nannies, please feel the Seven Gods. Leonor saw the monks discussing with the nuns, but he covered his chest with one hand and raised his 5 fingers with the other hand, making a prayer look in the air. Started to preach as a charlatan. My Majesty, you are not a devout believer of the Seven Gods. Some monks ultimately had devout faith. It was inappropriate to point out that Leonor's reasons were inappropriate. He was not a devout believer but pretended to be the name of the Seven Gods. God's suspicion. Some people dislike it, but some people stand up directly, posing like a charlatan, spread their hands, and hug them with their upper body. I was inspired by the Seven Gods, who pointed out the fall and despair of the church, and it is our duty to reform the church. No, it is our duty to repurify the church. I saw those bastards who drink and eat meat for a long time. They were ashamed of the Seven Gods, failed the teachings of the Seven Gods, and blasphemed our teachings. A nun jumped up and cursed. Let them be whipped and parade into atonement. Not enough. Expel their churches and let them fall into hell and suffer forever. People's hearts are available. The dirty things done by the church make them unable to see them, and this is the true heart of the people. I suggest that all of us get up and pray to the Seven Gods. Seeing that the atmosphere was almost brewing, Leonor spoke and suppressed the voices of everyone and asked them to get up with him under Leonor's call. All monks and nuns stood up one after another and followed him to pray to the Seven Gods. In the name of Heavenly Father, we must make the world just, Leonor said, and many monks and nuns recited it. In the name of the Virgin, we must make the world full of love. As a warrior, as the prayer to the Seven Gods ended, Leonor did not disband the meeting. Everyone, since we have unified our opinions, then the next step is to act. First, I want you to elect 7 elders, and you will replace the 7 archbishops, manage the church for the 7 gods. Leonor began to do the important things. Some of the monks and nuns who were summoned were pure and few desires, while others were different. However, the 7 gods' doctrines required restraint. Therefore, when they heard Leonor's words, they were silent and didn't know how to speak for a while. Can it be done? Leonor was a little disappointed with this group of marginal figures in the church, and had no organization at all. No wonder he was squeezed out of the court by the church. Your Majesty, it's up to you to designate. The bald monk stood up. Since that's the case, then I've appointed you. You must obey. Leonor saw that there were monks' requests, so he naturally couldn't ask for it. However, for these monks, he only learned a little from a Jesse, and did not know their essence. In the name of the 7 gods, we must comply with His Majesty's request. The monks spoke, and the nuns also asked Leonor to designate. Since you all recognize me so much, in the name of the 7 gods, Monk Riley, and Madam Phil, Madam Nass, Monk Carter, Monk Evan, Monk Sanka, Madam Essa, and 7 of you people come to serve as elders for the time being. If there's any need in the future, I will make adjustments. Leonor directly appointed the 7 elders. Your Majesty, is it over like this? The bald monk Riley was a little puzzled. Could it be that it was over like this? This is simply a playhouse. Of course not, my elder, Vincent. Leonor smiled and comforted the bald monk Riley, and shouted outside. Your Majesty, Vincent, wearing a long robe, turned out from behind the door. Go and execute my order. Leonor issued the order directly. Yes, Vincent responded, turned around and nodded to the guards. The guards who were ordered hurried out of the king's hall and rode onto the streets on fast horses. After a while, a large number of guards rushed out from all over the King's Landing city and rushed towards the Baylor Grand Hall. The guards rushed into the sacred temple, ordered the clergy to suspend all activities, and captured the church's top leaders, mainly the archbishop and the 7 archbishops. As the archbishop and the 7 archbishops were arrested, Leonor ordered people to ring all the bronze bells in the city. With a clanging sound, the 7 elders of the new Presbyterian church led monks and nuns to hold 7. The symbol of Mamros began to preach in the downstream city of guards, and countless believers along the way prayed silently. After a week of circles around the city, the sovereignty of the church has changed. Chapter 127 The Kingdom Shocks. By the end of the Presbyterian church's preaching, power has been changed. After all, the armed forces of the church were disintegrated more than 200 years ago, and the archbishop and the 7 archbishops had no ability to resist at all. Leonor only considered taking over the basic foundation of the church, so he would win over marginal figures in the church. Organize a Presbyterian church. The existence of the Presbyterian church allowed Leonor to stabilize the basic organization of the church. He did not rush to empty the money treasury within the church, but instead send professional papers, scribes and accountants into the church and infiltrate the church organization. Master the church accounts and churches, prayer halls and other industries in various places. For a long time, Leonor's kingdom was just a feudal regime, but he changed his management style in the past. The Red Castle of King's Landing City had always ruled King's Landing City through the implementation of the imperial meeting. If the prime minister did anything, he would send people to do it temporarily. As for the taxes of the kingdom, he would rely entirely on the golden robe to seal the road. The cap tax drives hooligans to blackmail merchants and the 7 kingdoms to pay protection fees to resolve the problem. After becoming the Minister of Finance, Leonor changed this method and brought professional accountants as clerks. At the same time, he adjusted his general policy to reduce the burden on the people through tax exemption and privatization of land and stimulate them to liberate their productivity. As for the expenses of the kingdom and the army, it is supported by monopolizing the income of handicrafts such as salt, iron, and pottery. If we look at it from another perspective, Leonor's group is just a business group with an army and administrative system, without its own bank, without its own street office, township office and village committee. The lack of grassroots organizations made him unable to implement the conscript system and could only rely on employment to conscript troops. He could not carry out effective tax collection operations. He could only blackmail merchants by blocking city gates and hiring hooligans, which he could not tolerate. The 7 Gods Church has great influence in the south of Westeros. Their monks are spread across many industries. As long as the larger villages are stationed by monks and nuns, and there are churches in smaller villages, it was precisely because of this that Leonor took advantage of the situation and squandered his strength to control the church. He planned to list a backdoor listing, and to take the influence of the church as existing, establish grassroots organizations in the kingdom, and turn churches and prayer halls into banks and townships. Office, transform monks and nuns into civil servants or doctors and nurses. Simply breaking down the church will only get a bunch of golden dragons. If he succeeds in doing this, he will establish a stable and complete civil servant, medical, taxation and publicity system. At that time, he will not only be able to obtain it continuously, Jin Long, and can mobilize a wider group of people to join the army, convey their ideas to everyone, and let them cooperate with their actions. Leonor's idea was very beautiful, but when he moved the church, he finally moved a big cake. The Presbyterian Church replaced the original archbishop and the 7 major bishops, and soon caused a shock in the 7 kingdoms. The crews flew from all over the place to King's Landing City, bringing snow-like letters. Earl Balhader, the Earl of the Tower of the River Bay, John Roose of the Fury City of the East, Rohan Rogmer, the Earl of the Golden Tooth City of the West, and Duke of Edmund Torley, the Earl of the Riverflow City of the River. Marquis of Wade Frey of Twin City wrote letters to express that they would not recognize the Presbyterian leadership of the church, and at the same time demanded that the king must release the archbishop and the 7 bishops, otherwise he would no longer surrender to the royal flag. Prince Doran Martell of Dorne Sunmere City and Madame Molina Tillier of the High Court also sent letters to Leonor personally, saying that he would be much more tactful and advised him to kill the church and get some money. There is no need to change the blood like this, as this will make the kingdom unstable. This is the attitude of your family towards the king. Leonor looked at the situation that almost all the world was against each other and scattered thick parchment letters directly on Mess Tyrael and Ober in front of the ministers. In front of Bren Martell and the others, Your Majesty, you didn't discuss this with us in advance. Mess faced with the parchment all over the ground, his face was pale. Why should I discuss with you? This is the revelation given to me by the 7 gods. Leonor directly defined his behavior as divine revelation. He could not have imagined that the nobles in various places would react so much, but this also made him more determined. If his reform is determined, if he does not face any resistance, then he should reflect on what is wrong. Your Majesty, I suggest you release the archbishop and the 7 bishops as soon as possible. Oberon's face was also very dark, but he was more confused. He couldn't understand why Leonor had stabbed the church as a hornet's nest. The church has always been very gentle, even if I was cut off last time but didn't turn my back. Why did I do this? It's impossible. Why do you want to oppose me? Leonor's heart hangs slightly. If Mesa and Oberon express a firm attitude, he will find a way to start from other aspects. I support you unconditionally. Your Majesty, you are my king. Mess was so scared that he knelt down directly. Your Majesty, I am loyal to you from beginning to end, and from this loyalty, please take back your life. Oberon also knelt down and asked Leonor to release the archbishop and the 7 bishops, so that there is still room for recovery in this way. What if I refuse? Leonor asked. Please allow me to resign from the position of chief inspector. Oberon buried his head directly. His Majesty the king was going crazy. He would definitely betray like Meg. Namelia was already pregnant with his child and could not let her go. Stumble into a Jedi here. Since this is the case, from now on, a Baron will be removed from his position as chief inspector. Someone will send a Baron to the White Sword Tower and not allow him to step out of the White Sword Tower. Leonor directly stolenly Oberon was placed under house arrest. Thank you, Your Majesty. Oberon happily accepted Leonor's order of confinement. When Oberon was sent away by the guards, Leonor turned his eyes to Mess Tyrael, who was kneeling beside him, asking at our king's hand, Lord Mess Tyrael, the Duke of the High Court and Earl of Tower, my eldest daughter, Vivian, was Duke of the Stormland and Duke of Dragonstone. If I had an accident, when there is no legal male heir, she will inherit the Iron Throne. Hearing Leonor's announcement, Mess, who was originally trembling, must have been ecstatic, and then looked up at Leonor, who had no expression on the Iron Throne. Your Majesty, you are Your Majesty revealed by the 7 gods. The Tyrier family will always support you unconditionally. Mess flattered directly. The above seals are added, and the lords of the 7 kingdoms are spread to the lords of the 7 kingdoms. Leonor directly decided to disclose the information. The current situation is very tense. A Baron has already put forward the uncooperational attitude of the Martell family, so we must firmly grasp the Tyrael family in our hands. Although we put ourselves in danger, it will at least ensure that the Tyrael family will not jump into the opposition camp. Chapter 128. The raindrops are small. In the River Bay, at the mouth of the Monday River, in the high palace castle of the Tyrier family, Olenna, Queen of Thorns, enjoys breakfast in the morning sea breeze. A gnome clown stands at her beside her. She sang for her with a crisp voice, and the maids of Yingi and Yanayan were eating slices of bread and laughing and talking in a low voice just as the pleasant morning was in the hustle and a hurry came in. Raymond, a bachelor from High Court, walked onto the balcony with a ring necklace between his neck. Raymond, you are so young today. Alina laughed at the old bachelor who was walking towards her with a piece of dried figs. Come on, Mom, I've been so young. Have you only found out today? Raymond replied with a joke and handed a roll of parchment to Alina. This is the letter from His Majesty our King, and the letter is public notice. Sexual crows brought. This is another killing or who has got the benefits. Alina put down the dried figs, took the parchment paper, directly pinched off the deer emblem paint seal on it, and then spread it open and took a look, with a relaxed face on her face. His expression suddenly became serious. Madam, Raymond couldn't help but heavier his voice when he saw Alina gradually becoming serious and keeping her. Come on, I'm not asleep. Go and get Varys, Garland, and Lolas for me. Alina rolled the parchment into her sleeves and spoke to the maids next to her. Yes, Yingying and Yanayan's maids heard this, nodded and stood up, and scattered and called for people. Yutong, stop singing, go and have your breakfast. Alina ran away and spoke to the dwarf clown who was still singing loudly. The dwarf wearing a hat heard the owner's order and quickly stopped singing and bowed slightly. The waiters on the balcony were almost dismissed, leaving only Alina and Raymond. The king has promoted my son to the title. He is now the Duke of the High Court and the Earl of Tower. Alina sent everyone away and spoke to Bachelor Raymond. Raymond was stunned in place. The Duke of the High Court was a fief of the Tyrion family, and now he is also the Earl of Tower. What does this mean? In addition, my granddaughter Vivian, who was temporarily conferred the crown prince, Alina added. Madam, isn't this exactly what we always wanted? Raymond spoke carefully. Yes. This is exactly what we always wanted. Vivian, she is only 2 years old. I thought, what kind of husband should I find for her? Alina sighed after a while. Vilas, Garland and Lolas, who were staying in High Court, were called over, and the 3 young generations of the Tyrion family gathered at Alina's knees and greeted her with good morning. Okay, don't salute like this, go and prepare your army. We have a war. Alina asked directly to the 3 children. Who are you going to hit? Vilas, who was leaning on a cane, looked slightly surprised. Tagshan Tower, remember, kill all the guys named Hater, and send a letter to Qing Island, so that the Pixar fleet can help you. But grandmother, what reason should we use to attack the Hater family? Garland was a little puzzled. Offend the king and encroach on the land of the Tyrion family. Alina took out the parchment from her sleeve and asked the 3 Tyrion brothers to read the contents of the letter. When he saw the content of the letter, the 3 brothers of Tyrion each had their own expressions. The oldest Vilas was worried. The second oldest Garland frowned and the youngest Lolas showed satisfaction. Look, Grandma, is it really necessary? Vilas asked. Your legs are lame, and your heart is soft. Alina left no sympathy. This is the honor your sister has won for herself, and it is also an honor that the Tyrion family cannot refuse. If you want you to do so, your sister and your father were killed by the king, and your nieces were killed by the throne, even if they were still in control. Facing the words of Queen Thorns, the 3 Tyrion brothers were all shocked. After looking at each other, they all expressed that they would immediately summon the knights to fight. Do it clean and beautifully, the faster the better. Alina did not forget to give a reminder before leaving, causing the 3 Tyrion brothers to nod to respond. The shock caused by the replacement of the archbishop with a Presbyterian church was great, but there were few large-scale riots. Except for the Tyrion family that accumulated firepower and began to attack the towering tower. The lords in various places were in a quiet state. Leonor asked Vincent to send secret spies to various places to explore the Hegian, Dorne, and the East Valley. Although many lords of the lords who sent letters to accuse him of blaspheming the 7 gods, they all announced in their territory that they confiscated the local church and other church property. This group of bastards, I'm not pious, I thought they were all crazy believers. After receiving the reward from the spies, Leonor couldn't help but feel depressed, feeling that the lords were too hypocritical and a little distressed, because the church is being recruited. And the future of the church is his. The lords confiscate the church's property, which is equivalent to dividing his property. Even if you feel sorry for it, there is no way. It is better to let the lords divide the church's property than to let them rise up and attack themselves. I'll ask you to share it first. How much will you eat? I'll turn around and let you spit it out more. Leonor felt cruel. He made a cruel thought to the lords from all over the country. Leonor personally went to the Bale Grand Church to preside over the incorporation of the church. If he didn't come to preside over the incorporation, he would not know what the incorporation would be like. The newly formed Presbyterians are all marginal people from the original church. They have some understanding of the church, but lack a unified cognitive concept. After gaining power, they just wantonly operate according to their own ideas, or blindly acquire power. Or the money spent relief of the poor and the weak is not a qualified ruler. Leonor had some predictions about the situation of the Presbyterian Church, and had arranged for accountants and recorders to take over the church's operation earlier. The Presbyterian Church was just a puppet stand he needed, but the puppets could not be idle, and they had to play a role for him. Leonor arranged various tasks for the Presbyterians, either to raise funds from merchants in the city, to mobilize monks to preach in the rural areas of the king's leadership in the Stormland, or to carry out medical societies and charitable organizations. In short, they cannot be idle due to the policy of privatization of land. Many free villages have appeared in Wangling, Stormland and the West. All of these villages are in the stage of autonomy. Although they have created a prosperous scene in agriculture, there are also many groups to plunder neighboring villages. The kingdom cannot manage this situation because it lacks people to go to the grassroots level. Now there are monks and nuns from the Seven Gods Church doing this. You are shepherding the people for the Seven Gods. You must understand the sufferings of the people and try your best to solve them. If the strength of one person is insufficient, report them to the kingdom. In the name of the Seven Gods, Westeros is the kingdom of faith, and we will turn this kingdom on earth into a kingdom on heaven. Your words and deeds will be watched by the Seven Gods, and the lives of believers will destiny for your future achievements, and you will enjoy the power of the kingdom and the glory of the seven levels of heaven. In Leonor's declaration and promise, devout monks and nuns began to pack up their parcels and go to villages everywhere. While spreading the faith of the Seven Gods, they also built the administrative system of the kingdom. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129: The Illegitimate Son Beller. The loose and only aims at making money, the Church of the Seven Gods was gradually twisted together under a series of operations by Leonor and slowly tempered into a special administrative system. As this administrative system was gradually completed, Leonor's Red Fort regime also ushered in various tasks. The monks sent snowflakes from all over the place, telling the suffering of various villages, lack of water, iron, and hooligans. The gangsters occupy the village and become king, etc. Leonor used to be silenced at all villages, but now he can see the sky through the church. Faced with these difficulties, he waved his hand and organized water conservancy projects, wholesale loans and organized iron tools to go to the countryside. As for the gangsters, his army just needed people to practice before conquering the unrest in various places. In this way, with rounds of political or military activities organized, a real kingdom is taking shape. While Leonor was also recruiting the church and using the church to organize the grassroots. In the Red Fort, Nemilia gave birth to a baby boy for Leonor with a cry of wow. Just call him Bell. Leonor held his eldest son and gave him the name of the Dragon King who was blessed by God. Then what's his surname? Nemilia asked Leonor with sweat on her face. My blood is flowing in his body. His surname is Wishu. Leonor lowered his eyes and gave the eldest son a surname according to tradition. Your Majesty, are you? Nemilia's face looked painful. She hoped that the child could be honest with her surname Baratheon, or give her a surname alone, at least to mark his royal bloodline in the past. Nemilia, who was a sand snake, looked down on people's concept of discriminating against her illegitimate children. Now she suddenly felt so stupid after giving birth to a child. Nemilia, the Terrier family stood on my side at a critical moment. If you want to blame your father and the Mardell family. Leonor showed no mercy, but Abelin's attitude be firmer. He would not treat this eldest son like this. But, my father, Nemilia wanted to defend her father for a few words, but was interrupted directly. No, but you cannot ask your father for leniently but strictly demand me. I have love for you and children, but I also have to be responsible for my kingdom, so all love must be put on hold. Leonor interrupted Nemilia coldly, and finally paused slightly and said, I will arrange for your father to visit you and the child later. I would like to advise you to stay honestly in Red Fort. This couple has benefit. Don't take him back to Yangji City. Why? Nemilia asked with tears in her eyes. She couldn't get any love here. Could it be that she could not return to her own home? Don't be stupid. The Dornies slander himself and do not discriminate against his illegitimate child, but do you want my child to be a tool to please others like you? Leonor scolded Nymeria. You see me as a tool. Nymelia's tears in her eyes were even more shocked. I also said you are not stupid. Who is the one who regards you as a tool? It's Oberyn. It's Darling Martell. Did you approach me under their command? My child was brought back by you. Yanji City? They will only use his bloodline to play Game of Thrones. Leonor directly exposed the tricks of the Martell family, which shocked Nymelia so much that she couldn't come back to her senses and was stunned there. Nymelia, I like you, so I will tell you this. Think about it carefully. Leonor looked at Nymelia, who was stunned, and sent the child back to her arms. The mother and son were the ones who were both dumbfounded. Only in Red Fort can you be protected, and you can only be mermaid meat when you go to other places. Nymelia took the child back, looked at the little black-haired and blue-eyed thing, and temporarily gave up thinking about Leonora's words just now, just hugging the flesh and blood that connected her heart, and shed tears silently. Leonor looked at Nymelia, who was crying silently, stepped forward and stroked her back slightly as comfort. Then he stayed with her for a while before leaving, and asked someone to bring Oberyn from the White Sword Tower here to accompany her. Nymeria, the 7 gods are here. How are you now? Is he a boy or a girl? When Oberyn came to his daughter's bed, he saw her who had just given birth, and felt pity, and when he saw her, he saw her. The child in his arms was full of love, and this was his first grandson. He's a boy. Nymelia faced her father, hesitated for a moment, and sent the child in her arms out. Oh my God. He is so cute. He looks very similar to his father, but don't be as hateful as his father. He locked me in the White Sword Tower and threatened to kill me. Oberyn hugged me. With a newborn Baelor, he complained about Leonor's hatefulness. Father, Nymeria shouted in tears. Name, you're crying. Did that bastard bully you? Oberyn approached and wiped his daughter's tears, avoided the servant's gaze, and lowered his voice. I'm preparing. You can recover as soon as possible, then take the children back to Yanji City with me. Back to Yanji City? Nymelia heard her father's whisper and subconsciously tightened her mind. Then she changed her mind a few times, and she replied in a low voice, Father, we can't escape. No, Name, believe me, I already have a solution. The Bravos will help us leave, but only if you have to recover. Oberyn comforted Nymelia. Okay, I will definitely do it. Nymelia nodded slightly to respond. Okay, that's it. What's the name of this little cute? Oberyn opened his distance from his daughter, hugged his beloved grandson, and suddenly remembered whether the child had a name. His name is Baelor. Nymelia replied. Baelor? Why did he give the child such a name? Like a lunatic. Oberyn complained directly. Father, why did you send me to him? Nymelia raised her eyes and looked at her father holding Baelor. Why do you want to ask this question? Oberyn hugged Baelor and shook his body and looked at his low daughter. Her condition seemed not very right. I just suddenly wanted to ask. Nymelia suppressed her urge to cry. To be honest, I didn't let you get close to him, but to get you and your sisters close to him. But he just chose you. Oberyn answered the question honestly. I think he has a good sense of mind. Among the sand snakes, the one who looks the most beautiful is not Nymelia, but Teresa. Puff. When Nymelia heard her father's words, her originally low mood instantly dissipated, and she couldn't help laughing, with an inexplicable sweetness. Yes. He and other sand snake sisters were sent over together, but that guy only liked him, not the most beautiful self, and he did not use himself as a tool. What are you thinking? Oberyn, holding the child, felt his daughter's condition was a bit weird. Father, don't run away. I won't go back to Yanji City. Nymelia raised her eyes and replied directly. Oberyn's expression suddenly became stunned, a little at a loss. I won't let my children become tools of the Martell family like me. Nymelia's answer was extremely firm. This is what you think now, right? Oberyn felt a little uncomfortable. Do you think my child can avoid this ending when he returns to Yanji City? Nymelia asked back, causing the Red Viper to fall into silence. Chapter 130. The best strategy is to defeat the enemy. The struggle for power is becoming increasingly brutal, but it is precisely in this struggle for power that a new kingdom is emerging. Even though Leonor constantly invests resources into the construction of the kingdom's grassroots organizations, his kingdom's wealth has only increased, because after the grassroots organizations took shape, his policies were effectively implemented. Leonor previously implemented many tax exemption policies, and most civilians still have sufficient wealth in their hands. After the monks and nuns sank to the grassroots level, they immediately levied these money in the name of donation, tithe, etc., plus the wealth originally accumulated by the church. The Red Fort's originally nearly exhausted treasury was immediately replenished. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and time came to 305 AC after conquest. Leonor's eldest daughter, Vivian, just past her 4th naming day. She can already speak fluently, can walk and eat by herself, showing intelligence beyond her peers, and her mother, Margaret, is pregnant again. Margaret now insists on praying to all the gods, including the 7 gods and the old gods, in the Godwood Forest of the Red Fort every day, praying that she will give birth to a healthy kingdom heir. Nymelia on the other side did not get pregnant again, but she carefully took care of her son Baelor, and begged her father Oberyn to teach him martial arts knowledge, so that he could show extraordinary intelligence, so as to gain his father's love. Leonor was a little disdainful of Margaret's behavior, and rolled his eyes at Nymelia. Baelor is only 2 years old. Even a 2-year-old child, even if he is a time traveler, cannot learn martial arts. At most, he can only learn to speak. Leonor was a little worried. There were undercurrents in his harem, and the outside of the dynasty was also unstable. It is said that the Stark family in the north sent people to Braavos to contact Stannis, with the intention of supporting him to make a comeback across the narrow sea in Essos. Daenerys accepted her nephew Aegon VI and Tyrion Lannister in Slavers Bay, and her power grew stronger. She began to vigorously suppress the slave owners. Tyrion is a smart man. He learned Leonor's approach in Meereen in Slavers Bay, engaged in land privatization and equal land distribution, allowing slaves and civilians to own their own land. While liberating productivity and stimulating commerce, he recruited craftsmen to build ships that could cross the sea, preparing to return to Westeros as a modern person. Leonor also hates slavery, and he agrees with Daenerys' behavior, so he sent his secret agent to add fuel to Slavers Bay. He funded some slaves in Slavers Bay, and let them go to the neighboring Volantis, Norvus, Cahir and other places to organize liberation movements, which made the noble priests of the slave-owning trade city-states Volantis, Norvus, Cahir very frustrated, and deepened their guard against the Queen of Meereen, leading to constant friction between the countries. Leonor not only used Daenerys' abolition movement to provoke friction between her and the nearby trade city-states, but also instructed secret agents to spread rumors to the Dothraki, Qarth, Ibanez, Volantis, Norvus and Cahir people. The secret agents told the Dothraki that Daenerys called herself Khaleesi of the Dothraki Sea and that she would conquer the entire Dothraki Sea, leading all Dothraki screamers across the Black Salt Sea. The secret agents told the people of Qarth, Iban, Volantis, Norvus, and Cahir that Daenerys was a descendant of the Valyrians, and that she brought dragons back to the world to revive the Targaryen dynasty. To this end, she built a large number of ships, and sooner or later she would the trade city-states, and then rebuild the ancient Valyrian Empire, bringing Volantis, Norvus, and Cahir back under control. With the spread of various rumors, Daenerys Meereen had increasingly bad relations with the surrounding trade city-states, and some Dothraki tribes gathered near Slavers Bay, frequently plundering Astapor and Yunque, destroying the trade routes between Meereen and Volantis, which made Daenerys, Aegon VI and Tyrion difficult to cope with, and shipbuilding activities were stagnated. Haha, Vincent, your secret agents are very good. Tell them that I am very satisfied with their actions and that they should be rewarded. Leonor received the information from Essos and felt extremely happy. What if you, Daenerys, have dragons? Can it be better than my superior strategy? This is all thanks to your majesty's good planning. Vincent was also sincerely convinced. His secret agents were just executors. In the final analysis, it was his majesty's excellent strategy that truly determined victory thousands of miles away. Okay, don't say these polite words. Your secret agents are excellent. Tell them to find or cultivate excellent successors, and then return to Westeros. I need capable people like them. Leonor waved his hand with a smile and promised a reward. This group of talents can just fill the gap in his diplomacy. Then I thank your majesty for them. Vincent quickly expressed his gratitude. Okay, next, let's go to the Prime Minister's tower for a meeting. Leonor nodded and got up to let Vincent and Dora go to the Prime Minister's tower with him. Inside the Prime Minister's tower, the hand of the King Mace Tyrell and Grand Knight Barristan had already led the ministers to wait. Now Leonor's 9 great ministers, except for the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Etiquette who have not been in place, the other 7 have all been in place, including the Minister of Agriculture, Donner Noy, the Minister of Finance Akai, the Minister of Law Agassi, the Minister of Military Affairs Gradin, the Minister of Taxation Marseilles, plus the Garrison Commander Dorit, the Minister of Intelligence Vincent, and others such as the King's Landing city manager Davos, the 7 elders of the church, etc. are also subordinate ministers. Seeing the hall full of ministers, Leonor also had a sense of accomplishment. Under their gaze, he walked up to the high place and sat down, and then waved his hand directly. Come on. Let's start our meeting today. Over the past few years, the ministers have become accustomed to Leonor's style. According to the already familiar meeting process, the ministers began to prepare to report on their work one by one, and the scribes arranged by the recorder Stephen also spread out their paper and pens to prepare for the meeting minutes. Your Majesty, the Hightower family of the Arbor has been wiped out by us 3 days ago, and Baelor Hightower has surrendered to us. Mace jumped out to report the results as soon as possible. Good, Leonor responded plainly. The Tyrell family used more than 10,000 troops. And it took 2 years to fight Hightower with land and sea. They are really weak, Your Majesty. Baelor Hightower of the Hightower family surrendered to us and proposed a trial by the 7 gods. Mace carefully raised his head and mentioned something. He wants a trial by combat. You can give him a trial by combat. Hightower has always been your vassal. Do you still need to ask me? Leonor snorted coldly. The trial by combat is to determine victory by martial combat. The Tyrell family intends to let him challenge himself. Is this to assassinate himself by martial arts? Hightower's behavior is treasonous. They don't deserve justice presided over by the 7 gods. I have decided to execute them. Mace quickly lowered his head. You can decide for yourself. The kingdom does not interfere in the affairs of the Reach. Next item on the agenda. Leonor announced the next item on the agenda with a cold face. Chapter 131, Dealing with the Iron Bank. Mace originally wanted to report his achievements and show off, but he didn't expect to be met with a cold face. He could only retreat to the side in dismay. Vincent, who was next to him, quickly stepped forward with a booklet in his arms, bowed first, and then stood up and said, Your Majesty, my scouts have returned with news that Lord Robb Stark, the Duke of the North, has sent Wyman Manderley, the Earl of White Harbor, to Bravos to meet with Prince Stannis. Your Majesty, I also have something to report. The Gaunt Minister of Finance, Akai, stepped forward. The envoy from the Iron Bank has arrived in King's Landing. Leonor had originally planned to let the ministers discuss this matter, but he didn't expect the Iron Bank to jump out at this time. It seemed that the contact between the North and Stannis was not simple. Is the Iron Bank also demanding interest this year? Leonor asked. No, they are demanding that the kingdom repay the principal along with the interest, totaling 1.6 million gold dragons. The National Treasury currently has wealth worth 2.1 million gold dragons, which can be repaid. Akai reported the numbers expressionlessly while holding an account book. How did Peter borrow the money in the first place? Leonor patted his knee, feeling very melancholy. He could afford to repay it, but he wasn't prepared to. If he repaid this sum of money, he wouldn't have the confidence to start a war with the North. The Iron Throne's credit, that's great. Come, my hand of the king, Lord Mace, and Lord Barristan, tell me, is the Iron Throne's credit more valuable, or 1.6 million gold dragons? Leonor patted his legs and posed a question to the people below. Of course, the Iron Throne's credit is more valuable. A thought flashed through the minds of Mace and Barristan below, but they knew that since Leonor had raised this question, the answer he wanted was definitely not this. Your Majesty, the value of these two cannot be compared. Barristan replied slightly reservedly. How stupid. Leonor looked at the stunned Mace and the reserved Barristan, feeling annoyed in his heart, but he nodded with a smile on his face, agreeing, yes. I also think so. 1.6 million gold dragons. This number is very large, but it is far from comparable to the Iron Throne's credit. As king, if I lose my credit, then you will no longer trust me. That is absolutely impossible, Your Majesty. No matter what you do, we will absolutely support you. Mace immediately jumped out to express his loyalty. If you dare not support me, I will directly send you to the 7 hells. Leonor ridiculed Mace's clumsiness, but on the surface, he pretended to sigh and shake his head. Alice, I know the intentions of all the ministers, but I am very worried. How many years have we not seen winter now? How many years have we not seen winter? The ministers were a little confused when they heard Leonor's sudden sigh. How did the topic suddenly jump here? Some people were stuck on the surface, but others were clever. Minister of Agriculture Donald Noy directly raised his hand. Your Majesty, I have an opinion on the Iron Bank's debt. Speak. Leonor supported his knee with one hand, leaning his body slightly forward, appearing to listen. Your Majesty, I believe that we no longer need to repay the Iron Bank's debt, for 3 reasons. Donald puffed out his bulging beer belly, his words causing a stir among the ministers, but he ignored the others and just said to himself, first, the white ravens of the citadel may come at any time. The coming winter will be extremely long. We must prepare for winter. Instead of giving this money to the Iron Bank to repay the debt of the late King Robert, it is better to keep it to prepare for winter. Yes, hearing Donald's words, the ministers couldn't help but suddenly see the light. What are the other 2 reasons? Leonor nodded slightly, signaling Donald to continue. Second reason, please allow me to be disrespectful to the late king. The late King Robert borrowed a huge sum of money from Peter, all of which he used for his personal expenses, which did not benefit the kingdom in any way. The kingdom has no reason to repay his debts. These are your loyal words, and they speak the truth. You will not be punished for this. Leonor directly waved his hand. For the sake of the kingdom's interests, Robert's reputation could only be set aside, and that guy didn't have much reputation anyway. Third reason, the money the Iron Bank lent us, we have paid a large amount of interest every year in the past. The interest added together is enough for us to repay the principal. Therefore, we owe each other nothing. Donald stated the third reason. Akai, Leonor looked at his Minister of Finance. Your Majesty, that is indeed the case. Adding up the annual interest, we have repaid the principal and even exceeded it, by about 200,000 gold dragons. Akai gave an affirmative answer. That's perfect. Since that's the case, then reply to the envoy of the Iron Bank. Just say that there. Leonor clapped his hands immediately upon hearing Akai's reply, preparing to reply to the Iron Bank in this way, but was interrupted by a voice from below. Your Majesty, please allow me to speak. It is unwise to reply to the Iron Bank at this time. Davos stood up from below. Lord Seaworth has a different opinion. Please speak. Leonor was not unhappy about being interrupted, but instead very seriously allowed Davos to speak. Your Majesty, there is a saying in Bravos, the Iron Bank is not to be trifled with. If we reply to the Iron Bank in this way, they will definitely support our enemies, such as the North, who are currently in contact with Prince Stannis. Davos explained the situation. That makes sense. Then, according to Lord Seaworth's opinion, what is the appropriate course of action? Do you have a better way? Leonor had actually thought of the situation, but considering that the Northerners went to Bravos to meet with Stannis, he subconsciously believed that the Iron Bank had played a role in it and had automatically included them. Your Majesty, I think it would be better if we repay the Iron Bank's debt. Davos cautiously put forward his idea, causing a stir among the ministers. Continue. Leonor frowned slightly, signaling Davos to finish speaking. We repay the Iron Bank's debt, but with a condition, to borrow another sum of money from the Iron Bank. Davos put forward a hypothesis. Can it be done? Leonor did not reply, but looked at the Minister of Finance. Akai, it's worth a try. Akai's large, bubble-like eyes shifted, looking at Davos with a strange expression. What was this guy thinking? Pay back a sum of money and then borrow another sum of money. Is this repaying the money or not? Your Majesty, please allow me to make some more suggestions. While borrowing money, the Iron Bank will definitely think. During this period, we can bribe the envoy of the Iron Bank, at least to delay the time, so that the Iron Bank cannot make a decision immediately. Davos then put forward detailed operational suggestions. In this way, you will organize a team to contact the Iron Bank. Akai, you will be Lord Davos's assistant and fully assist him. Leonor directly handed the matter over to Davos. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. Davos directly knelt on the ground. Completing the task I have given you and not betraying my trust is the greatest gratitude to me. Leonor received Davos's gratitude without any guilt. Chapter 132, How to Stabilize Dorne. The Iron Bank's position is very important. Before determining whether they will join the opposition, we cannot rashly push them into the hostile camp. Davos's suggestion is crucial. Therefore, Leonor has entrusted him with the task of connecting with the Iron Bank, with the Minister of Finance, RK, assisting him. All of you should learn from Donal and Davos and put the interests of the country first. Steve, add the matter of connecting with the Iron Bank to the agenda of the next small council meeting. Davos, don't panic, you have no time limit. Feel free to connect with the envoys of the Iron Bank, just report back regularly. Now, let's move on to the next item on the agenda and discuss the issue of the North. At Leonor's request, the meeting moved on to the next item. Your Majesty, for a long time, Robb Stark of the North has failed to fulfill his obligations as a vassal of the kingdom by not coming to King's Landing to pay homage to you. This time, he met with Prince Stannis without prior notice, which clearly shows signs of disloyalty," said Grandmaster Graden, the Minister of War, stepping forward. "Are there any objections?" Leonor nodded slightly and asked the other ministers. The ministers attending the meeting, including Prime Minister Tanai, looked at each other in silence. It seems that everyone agrees. "Since we all know the North's disloyalty, let's discuss how we should respond to this situation," Leonor continued, nodding. "Your Majesty, please allow me to speak. The North and the Riverlands have always been allies. If they successfully contact Prince Stannis this time, then among the Seven Kingdoms, the attitudes of the Vale of Arryn in the east, some lords in the Westerlands, and the Lords of Dorne will definitely waver." The Ariston stepped forward to remind Leonor that war with the North was no small matter. Not only the lords in various regions, but also Bravis across the Narrow Sea is very likely to stand against us, Graden added, noting that the Iron Bank was still being persuaded and could not be counted as an ally. "Indeed, you are right. So, my lords, do you have any solutions for me to resolve these problems?" Leonor nodded in agreement. He had stalled Daenerys with superior strategy, but his current diplomatic situation was not advantageous either. "Your Majesty, I have a different opinion. Compared to the cold and impoverished North, you, as the ruler of the Iron Throne, possess greater prestige and wealth. The lords may waver, but I believe they will lean more towards us." Donal stood up, opposing Graden's words. "Then how do you think we should make the lords lean towards us?" Leonor did not object. Lords everywhere were like grass in the wind, but to truly win them over, benefits had to be offered. He was only able to sit firmly on the throne now because he was strong enough and had the support of the Tyrells. Donal raised his head slightly, glanced at Leonor, who showed no intention, and was unsure how to answer. "Return to your seat first, and let everyone think about it." Leonor waved his hand, signaling Donal to return to his seat, and called on the ministers to discuss together, as two heads are better than one. "Your Majesty, I have a suggestion." Minister of Law Agassi stepped forward. "Speak." Leonor looked at the elderly monk. "I suggest using marriage to appease Dorne," Agassi suggested, and before Leonor could express his opinion, he said, "Among the Seven Kingdoms, we can ignore the attitude of the Riverlands. They are already deeply allied with the North. We can also ignore the Vale of Arryn. Before the new Lord of the Eyrie, little Robert, comes of age, Royce will definitely not likely let the Vale into danger. Only Dorne in the south is an exception." Continue. Leonor nodded, letting the old monk continue. "The Dornish have different customs from us and have often threatened our borders in the past. Once they attack us while we are dealing with the North, we will be in a state of being attacked from both sides, so stabilizing Dorne is of utmost importance." Agassi spoke eloquently. "The best way to solidify an alliance is through marriage, but who should I send to Dorne for a marriage alliance?" Leonor sighed slightly. "I heard that Prince Dorne's son, Prince Quentyn, is very handsome. Although he is old, he would be suitable to marry your eldest daughter, Princess Vivienne." Agassi proposed marrying Vivienne to Doran's son, Quentyn Martell. Hearing Agassi's words, Prime Minister Mace immediately jumped out. "No, Your Majesty, this is not a good idea. The Dornish are snakes, and they never remember favors. Marrying our most beloved Vivienne to that little snake is not a good idea. Vivienne is indeed too young. Rather than marrying her to Sunspear, I would rather have a child of my family marry a woman from House Martell." Leonor was also somewhat resistant to the idea of marriage, especially using his underage daughter as a bargaining chip. "Prince Doran does have a daughter, Arianne Martell. She is a beautiful young woman with no betrothal, but Your Majesty, you have no suitable male relatives to marry her." Agassi sighed somewhat. "What about my brother Robert's son, Podrick? He inherits the blood of the king and House Florent and is noble enough." Leonor mentioned Podrick, "But he is a bastard." Agassi frowned slightly. "I can legitimize him and list him as one of my heirs." Leonor felt that he should also throw some bait to Dorne. "How can this be allowed? How can a dirty and lowly bastard inherit the throne?" Mace immediately shouted. House Tyrell had been betting on this for so long and would never allow the Martell family of Dorne to share this power. "Your Majesty, this is not good. If you are willing, rather than having Podrick marry Arianne, it would be better to legitimize Baelor Waters." Agassi also felt it was inappropriate to legitimize his brother's bastard as an heir. In terms of male heirs, the king was not without his own children. Leonor dragged out his voice. "No, absolutely not. I absolutely will not allow this." Mace glared at Agassi, almost wanting to strangle the old monk. His suggestions were more outrageous than the last. "Lord Mace, I understand your meaning, but do you have any way to stabilize Dorne?" Agassi was not afraid of Mace and directly asked him if he had any better solutions to propose. "I don't have a better way to stabilize Dorne, but I absolutely disagree with the Dornish snakes disturbing the kingdom." Mace directly tore his face. He absolutely disagreed with doing so. "Let's put this issue aside for now and discuss it next time." Leonor saw that Mace was really angry and instructed Steve, the recorder next to him, not to discuss it any further. He did not expect that they were originally discussing how to deal with the North, but ultimately it came down to the issue of the kingdom's heir, although it was a coincidence. This matter was a seed that made Leonor a little tempted. He also wanted to legitimize Baelor Waters. As a father, he did not want his son to be an illegitimate existence. Chapter 133, Long Live the King. Lionel also wanted to legitimize his son Baelor, but the attitude of House Tyrell was something he had to consider, so he quickly called a halt to the topic. Next item, Your Majesty, as per your request, we have been working in various ways to improve the storage time of food. Agriculture Minister Donald stood up directly, starting the next stage of the agenda at an extremely fast pace, helping Lionel avoid an awkward atmosphere. "How are the results?" Lionel quickly asked. Improving the storage period of food was an urgent topic, as it was related to whether Westeros could safely survive the coming winter. "According to some of the ideas you proposed, we changed the way food is processed, cooking pears and apples in sugar water, then sealing and boiling them, making more durable canned fruits. We can also air dry the pulp into candied fruit. These methods have greatly extended the shelf life of the fruit." Donald narrated his achievements. "Well, not bad. In this way, we can enrich the variety of food in winter, but we still need other foods, especially staple foods such as meat and grains." Lionel nodded in approval, but still felt it was not enough. Fruit is just a supplementary food, at most adding some flavor. The focus is on staple foods that fill the stomach. We learned the method of storing fruits, using spices and salt to cook and seal some meats and beans, which also effectively extended the storage time of meat, but the taste. Donald showed an indescribable expression. "We need to do more experiments. Cooking is a delicate job. You can consult more professional people and give them rewards and remuneration to effectively stimulate their motivation." "What about grains?" Lionel nodded to affirm Donald's achievements, and gave his own opinions at the same time, but he was still concerned about the storage methods of grains. "Your Majesty, I'm sorry, we haven't found a better way to store grains." Donald's expression turned gray. "No need to be like this. The power of people always has its limits. This is also the reason for the existence of the seven gods. I think it's better to do this. Issue a reward to the people. As long as they can help us improve the way food is stored, or provide corresponding effective methods of storing food, no matter what their status, the king will give them identity and monetary rewards." Lionel decided to issue a reward to the people. One person's plan is short, two people's plans are long, and they can always come up with a solution. "Merciful Majesty, you are the guidance of the seven gods to the world." Donald directly flattered him. "The seven gods give me guidance, to turn the kingdom on earth into the kingdom in heaven, to make all Westeros people proud of this land, and we all have to work hard for this." Lionel made a sacred expression and tapped 7 times with his hand, and then, without waiting for everyone to agree, he said, "In addition to extending the shelf life of food, the same is true for agriculture and farming. As long as you can come up with a way to increase land production and make work more convenient, I will never be stingy with rewards. Whether it's a farmer or a blacksmith, tell them to treat this as a martial arts competition that belongs to them. Anyone who can promote the progress of their industry is a champion and can be rewarded. The seven gods are above. Long live your Majesty." The monk representing the blacksmiths and the group of ministers directly knelt down on the ground with a thud when he heard Lionel's words about rewarding production, with tears in his eyes. For thousands of years, someone has finally seen the efforts of farmers and craftsmen. The seven gods are above. Long live your Majesty. Other monks and nuns followed suit, kneeling on the ground and shouting long live the king. Seeing the people of the church system so excited, the officials and nobles looked at each other, belatedly got up and followed, and the ministers in Prime Minister's tower, except for Mace, instantly knelt down, all shouting the seven gods are above. Long live your Majesty. Salute the seven gods. Salute all the people. Lionel accepted the worship of the people, only feeling infinite confidence in his heart, and couldn't help but learn from the divine man in his memory. Holding his waist with one hand and waving with the other, "Long live your Majesty." The response to Lionel's call was even more enthusiastic, which made Mace, who was standing alone in the crowd, a little embarrassed, and followed suit and knelt down at first. His heart swelled, but over time, the excitement subsided, and Lionel felt bored again, put down his hands, and sat back in his seat. Okay, now let's move on to the next item. The ministers below were shouting happily, but when they heard the emotionless words from above, they all stopped, and stood up reluctantly in twos and threes. It would be better to shout slogans like this, but to talk about topics and hold meetings. They would have to worry about being scolded if they didn't speak well. The ministers were not without resentment in their hearts. Next item, don't you have anything to say? Lionel was very dissatisfied when he saw the ministers were lazy. How could they be so unmotivated? Your Majesty, my scouts recently sent back news that across the narrow sea on the continent of Essos, Daenerys has proclaimed herself queen in Meereen. She has accepted her nephew Aegon VI and the remnants of House Lannister, and they are growing stronger. Vincent quickly stood up and told the news about Daenerys, seeing the atmosphere was awkward. Listen, my enemies are growing and plotting, but you are here suspecting each other. When Lionel mentioned suspicion, he directly pointed his finger at Mace Tyrell, who was standing below, and the intention was self-evident, facing the king, pointing at him from above. Mace, as the hand of the king, felt hot all over for a moment. He felt that all the eyes around him should have looked at him, and he didn't know what to do for a while. When he wanted to open his mouth to argue, he heard the king above speak again. Now everyone, don't put your energy on those meaningless things. Let's think about how to deal with the increasingly powerful Daenerys. Lionel diverted the topic before Mace could react. He was just venting his anger and saying a few words, and now he must not fall out with the Tyrell family. Faced with Lionel's words, there was silence in the hall. It was not that the ministers did not want to speak, but they could not think of a way to deal with Daenerys, who had 3 dragons and an unknown number of troops. Look at you. Lionel looked at the silent ministers below and couldn't help but get angry. Weren't you awesome just now? Now you are all mute. Your Majesty, we really don't know the situation of Slavers Bay and that girl from House Targaryen. Minister of Military Affairs Graddon couldn't help but stand up and complain. It wasn't that they didn't want to speak, but they knew too little information. If you don't understand, then why don't you try to understand? As subjects, can't you share the worries and difficulties for the king? Lionel said as a matter of course. Then you have to give us time. Graddon's voice gradually became smaller. Okay, I'll give you time. At the next meeting, this topic will be discussed first. Lionel opened his mouth to the recorder Stephen next to him, telling him to arrange this topic to be the first one. Now are there any other topics? If not, then, Your Majesty. Chapter 134 Contradiction. Leonor was about to explode at the ministers, who collectively went silent whenever Daenerys was mentioned, and then stood up to report something just as the meeting was about to end. However, when he saw that it was Barristan, in white clothes and white armor, who had stood up, he quickly straightened his body. Teacher, do you have something to report? Leonor always maintained respect for Barristan, because this old man, apart from being a bit rigid in his thinking, could be said to be his direct and staunch supporter. Apart from not being able to offer advice, he could completely entrust his back to the other party. Your Majesty, the Knight's Code that you asked me to compile has been initially completed. Barristan took out a stack of parchment from under his white silk cloak. Okay, thank you for your hard work, teacher. I will read it carefully and give my opinions. I may need you to make changes again at that time. Leonor waved his hand, and Brienne, who understood the instruction, quickly took the parchment and manuscript for him. It is my duty, Your Majesty. Barristan's attitude was extremely humble. With the completion of this Knight's Code, his life would be nearly complete. Okay, after the manuscript is completed, everyone can read it and offer suggestions together. Is there anything else? If not, then this meeting is adjourned. Leonor waited for Brienne to collect the manuscript and asked the ministers again. This time, there were no extra people. The meeting ended smoothly, and the people present got up and left the Prime Minister's tower in twos and threes. Leonor should also get up and leave. This was the Prime Minister's tower, belonging to Mace Tyrell, but he did not move. Instead, he addressed Mace below, with the departing crowd as witnesses. Lord Mace, we need to talk. I am honored. Mace did not have his usual cheerful demeanor, but instead wore a stern face, and his tone was stiff. He was still unhappy about the meeting just now. He looked very angry. Leonor looked at the sulky Mace and felt that his words just now had not given him enough face. He estimated that he would have to coax him later to make him feel better when all the ministers had left in 2s and 3s. Leonor walked down from the throne and walked towards Mace's side. The many scribes and recorder Steve all lowered their heads, wanting to leave but not daring to move, and could only brace themselves and act as invisible people. "Father, I'm really sorry about just now." Leonor came to Mace's desk and carefully apologized to his father-in-law. Mace's expression softened a bit when he heard Leonor speak, but out of face, he did not speak. "Father, let's talk somewhere else." Seeing that Mace was still acting sulky, Leonor turned his head and glanced at the others present, and whispered to his father-in-law to go to a place with fewer people. "Let's go." Mace still looked sulky, but he still gave some face and got up to follow Leonor away. Leonor, escorted by Brienne and the other King's Guard, left the Prime Minister's tower and chose a secluded courtyard for a secret conversation. "Father, I still want to apologize for the situation just now." Leonor waited until there was no one around and apologized to Mace again. Not giving him face in such a public place was indeed a bit too much. Cough. "You shouldn't have done that." Mace, seeing that there was no one here, no longer pretended what was doing that. Leonor didn't know if Mace's displeasure was about the same thing as his apology, but he couldn't ask directly, so he could only nod and admit his mistake with a chuckle. "Leonor, let me call you that." "You?" Mace saw Leonor nodding and accepting his teachings, and boldly called out his name. "Of course, my father. You are Margaery's father, and also my father. We are king and subject, but also family. You can call me by my name directly." Leonor nodded repeatedly. "Leonor, to tell you the truth, you have been guarding against us." Mace raised his head slightly and said with some complaint and dissatisfaction, "You are so wary of us, yet you say we are family." "My father, how can you say that?" Leonor revealed a wrong expression. "I also have my own difficulties." "What difficulties? Did we betray you?" Mace laughed directly in anger. He could not accept Leonor's statement. "My lord, you have not betrayed me, but you are also guarding against me." Seeing that Mace was taking it seriously, Leonor directly opened up the conversation. Mace opened his mouth wide when he heard this. His family had been so sincere to Leonor. Why did Leonor still think that his family was guarding against him? "Isn't that so? You have been forcing me to name Vivian and Arya as crown princesses. What are you trying to do? Do you want to use them to replace me?" Leonor directly pointed out the deepest conflict between the Tyrell family and himself. No, Mace was a little overwhelmed by Leonor's questioning. These things were certainly true, but he believed that he absolutely could not admit them. "If that's the case, then why have you been forcing me?" Leonor pressed. "Of course, it's for making your kingdom more stable." Mace's mind didn't work quickly, but he temporarily found a relatively good excuse. "Is that so?" Leonor questioned. "Then I really misunderstood you. This is also your difficulty, right?" Of course, Mace nodded repeatedly. "Just like you have your own difficulties that you have to force me with, I also have my own difficulties." "Father, what do you think?" Leonor's goal was not to pursue Mace relentlessly, as that would be meaningless. His goal was to have a good talk with the Tyrell family and resolve the deadlock without intensifying the conflict. Of course, Mace nodded. "In order to eliminate some unspoken difficulties between us, let's put aside those interests and talk." "What do you think, Father?" Leonor suggested. Of course, but only we talk." Mace finally understood Leonor's meaning, but his eyes turned. "Of course not. I would rather hold a banquet, where we and Margaery can sit together, but I don't think Margaery's current body is suitable for participating in such activities. She needs a quiet environment." Leonor really wanted to talk directly with Mace, but he knew that Mace could not make decisions for the Tyrell family, and he did not want to put the pregnant Margaery in the middle of himself and the Tyrell family to suffer. Leonor didn't know if Margaery would suffer. He felt that his queen should unhesitatingly stand on the side of her family, but she should also consider her own interests, so he decided to exclude her first. "That's easy. I'll write a letter to Highgarden and ask my mother to come over." Mace's opinion of Leonor changed slightly when he heard Leonor's words. He said he wanted to invite the person who could really make the decision to come and talk, and he knew that he couldn't resist Leonor. "Of course, I will prepare the banquet," Leonor readily agreed. Chapter 135 The Knight and the Rose. Lady Olenna had some time before arriving in King's Landing from Highgarden. Compared to preparing a feast to welcome her, Lionello preferred to enjoy a quiet life, receiving intelligence summaries from all over Westeros and Essos. When he wasn't busy, he could also write some of Sir Barristan's Knight's Code, As the strongest knight of the era, Sir Barristan had put a lot of effort into knight's code. He wrote down all the qualities he expected of a knight, summarizing 7 virtues: loyalty, justice, compassion, courage, honor, sacrifice, and soul. It was written in a flowery manner, but ultimately, this knight's code described what a perfect knight should be like. Barristan himself was very sincere. He pointed out knights who exemplified each of the 7 virtues. For example, he regarded Jon Connington, a former opponent, as the most loyal knight. He saw Eddard Stark as the most just knight, and Jaime Lannister as the most compassionate. 7 virtues, 7 knights, none of whom was Barristan himself. Leonello admired Barristan's humility, but he neither affirmed nor denied his sincerity, nor did he affirm or deny these 7 virtues. So, he wrote a letter of feedback to old Barristan: "My dear teacher, I have finished reading your Knight's Code and have many thoughts on the words and deeds of knights. I am writing these thoughts to you now, and I hope you will find them helpful. First, I don't think your 7 virtues are comprehensive enough. I suggest you change justice to righteousness, compassion to mercy, and courage to valor. Sacrifice and soul are not very meaningful and can be temporarily omitted. Of all the virtues, I believe righteousness should be the most important. I know that perhaps the word righteousness is very general, and it is the opposite of evil, but precisely because evil is uncertain, so is righteousness. However, I believe that true righteousness is recognized by everyone. For example, who should a knight protect? I think you would definitely say nobles, right? No, my opinion is completely different from yours. I believe that righteousness is the goodness rooted in everyone's heart, like a mother's love for her son, a subject's loyalty to the king. Maintaining this most basic order is true righteousness. At the same time, when those most basic orders become a shackle, a true knight should smash it in and create a new order that suits everyone. This is also righteousness. I don't know if you can understand the righteousness I described, but that's what I think. Compared to righteousness, I don't value loyalty as much, but I can't deny that it is an important virtue. Corresponding to loyalty is trust. We should be loyal to the trust others place in us. Leonello wrote down all his views on righteousness, loyalty, mercy, and valor, filling 3 pages. Then, he asked someone to send these feedback letters and the first draft of Knight's Code back to him, so that he could revise it while looking at them. Old Barristan was a pragmatic man. He probably also knew the significance of Leonello asking him to write this Knight's Code. Although he didn't really want to revise his views according to political needs, he felt that Leonello's letter made sense, so he replied that he would selectively revise Knight's Code. Writing Knight's Code was a long-term task. This kind of draft could not be completed in a day or 2. After receiving the reply, Leonello sent Barristan paper, pens, wine, food, and other rewards, and then began to prepare for the meeting with House Tyrell. During the 20 days of waiting, a carriage painted with a rose sigil arrived at the Red Keep in King's Landing under the escort of hundreds of knights and moved into the king's chambers that night. A rare grand banquet was held in the King's Hall of King's Landing. Lifelike roasted peacocks and huge pigeon pies were brought to the table. How rich! Look, our king finally understands that he is the richest man in this land. Olenna, in a gold-embroidered green silk dress, made an exaggerated expression, making everyone around her laugh. My lady, why do you say that? I am very poor now, Leonello asked with a smile in the face of Olenna's joke. His Majesty is very poor. The smile on Olenna's shriveled face slightly faded, and she made a careful listening gesture. Of course, I still owe money to the Iron Bank and you. Leonello nodded with a smile. Your Majesty, do you owe the Tyrell family money? Olenna asked in feigned surprise. Don't I? Leonello's smile faded. You are wrong. No, you have never borrowed money from the Tyrell family. Olenna nodded with an affirmative expression, directly writing off the Iron Throne's loan from the Tyrell family. Hiss. Leonello took a slight breath in his heart. This is indeed the legendary Queen of Thorns, and it is indeed a bit thorny. The Tyrell family wrote off the debt. This seems to be a good thing, as if they are conveying sincerity, but the more they pay, the more they hope to gain, without exception. Your Majesty, our friendship with the Iron Bank is limited, but if you have any financial difficulties, we can help you with all our strength. After all, you are our Majesty, Olenna said with a sincere expression. Haha, if there is a need, I will definitely mention it. I hope you won't be stingy then. Leonello smiled awkwardly. The Queen of Thorns took the initiative to offer help. Is this trying to stab me to death? My Majesty, we have sworn an oath to the 7 gods to be unconditionally loyal to you. Olenna stood up directly from her seat. Wait, madam, You are Margaery's grandmother, and also my grandmother. Today is our internal family banquet. We don't need to be like this." Leonello looked at the old woman who was about to kneel down and was a little afraid of her. Olenna saw Leonello's appearance and was about to open her mouth to say something, but was directly interrupted. "Grandmother, let's talk about everything after the banquet, how about it? Let's talk alone." Leonello couldn't resist Olenna, but this occasion was not suitable for discussing issues. "Okay, no problem, the reach is at your disposal," Olenna responded with great solemnity. "Don't be like this, grandmother, our banquet needs some joy, don't be so serious." Leonello waved his hand directly. "Moon boy, sing for our king." Olenna immediately signaled the jester who came with her to sing and cheer. The small dwarf, dressed in colorful clothes, immediately ran to the center of the king's hall when he heard the master's request, raised his head and made a high-pitched throat to start, followed by a cheerful ditty with a burst of tongue-twisting fast singing. In this cheerful singing, the banquet officially began. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Briefing. Unable to withstand it, completely unable to withstand it, the Thorn Queen's offensive was much more intense than imagined, completely and decisively riding off the debt, directly passing the baton and defecting, catching Leonov somewhat off guard, who used the banquet as a buffer while Leonov was dealing insincerely with Lady Olenna. He was secretly pondering in his heart the Tyrell family released considerable goodwill, and upon closer thought, this was a good sign, representing that they would continue to invest in the Baratheon dynasty, and his alliance with them remained solid and effective. The alliance with the Tyrell family remained effective, which instantly improved the southern situation that Leonov was worried about. Even if the Martell family of Darwin rebelled, the Tyrell family would help contain them. The situation in the south had improved, but the future of the Baratheon dynasty would inevitably face a struggle for succession or a disturbance from the maternal relatives. Although he had already made a promise to the Tyrell family, Leonov did not want his dynasty to have overly powerful maternal relatives in his heart, but the current situation did not allow him to care so much. The north was in contact with Stannis, and they might go south at any time, while Daenerys across the Narrow Sea was also growing stronger day by day. Those diplomatic trips could not hold her back forever, and he must complete the unity of the Tyrells and Martells as soon as possible, then end the threat from the north, and finally concentrate on dealing with Daenerys. When the banquet was almost over, Leonov had a general plan in his mind. He looked at Olenna, who was wiping her mouth on the right, with a smile and said, "Madam, have you heard of the saying? Walking after a full meal helps to prolong life." "Of course, I've heard of it, and I've always had this habit. Are you willing to accompany this toothless old woman for a walk?" Olenna heard Leonov's implication that he wanted to talk to her alone, so she stood up and extended her right hand. "Of course, it's my honor." Leonov stepped forward, took the old lady's right arm, and helped her walk out of the king's hall. Mother, Mace, who was seated at the table, stood up, ready to follow. "You stay here, and you too. I'm walking with the king." Olenna stopped Mace and the other servants, not letting them come over. Leonov raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw Olenna's posture, but he didn't interfere much, just waited for Olenna to dismiss the others, helped her leave the king's hall, and walked towards the unmanned garden. In the night there were no flowers in the garden at night. Brienne led 3 Kingsguard, divided into 2 in front and 2 in the back, holding torches to illuminate Leonov and Olenna in the middle, but the light did not shine much. "Your Majesty, don't you have anything to say?" Olenna asked Leonov suddenly while admiring the night scene. "Madam, my current situation is not optimistic." Leonov glanced at Olenna, only to see that the Thorn Queen's face was calm, so he made a tentative move. "Not optimistic? Are you referring to the fact that you wiped out the lions and eliminated most of the disobedient Stormlands lords?" Olenna almost laughed. "Yes, as you said, I eliminated most of the lords in the Westerlands and Stormlands, but the dire elves in the north, and the growing dragon across the Narrow Sea, these are our enemies," Leonov reminded Olenna. "Oh." Olenna dragged out her voice, without answering. "Do you think I can deal with the dire elves and the dragon at the same time?" "Madam," Leonov pressed, "they cannot be connected together." Olenna didn't think the situation was so bad. "As far as I know, the dire elves are actively contacting your brother, instead of Daenerys, who is playing the game of saving slaves. The dire elves were also one of the main forces in overthrowing the dragons back then, But Daenerys will come back sooner or later, madam. You understand this, we all understand this, or is Tyrell planning to turn again? But who are you planning to send to sleep with a dragon this time? Leonor was sarcastic. I heard a strong sense of sarcasm from your words, but I have to answer you. This is the game of power, my majesty. If necessary, I can even go to sleep with a dragon. Olenna directly replied to the king's dark face. She couldn't see Leonor's expression, and she didn't care. The game was like this good wine to hegemony, the ultimate romance of men. To you, it's either kill or fuck. It's ridiculous. Leonor complained in his heart. As you said, this is the game of power. If necessary, the direwolves can also sleep with a dragon. What do you plan to do then? Leonor replied to Olenna. Let's talk about it when that time comes. Olenna directly played rogue. The old woman is full of thorns. Really difficult to deal with. Leonor intended to use the current grim situation to make the Tyrell family further obey him, but Olenna did not admit this situation, which meant that they did not want to obey, or did not want to obey unconditionally. Your Majesty, instead of worrying about those long-term things, you should think about the present. Your kingdom is currently without an heir. Without an heir? Madam, my ravens have spread the news everywhere. Haven't you received it? Leonor frowned slightly. If he had an accident, Vivian could inherit the throne. What does Tyrell mean by saying this? I don't think a girl is suitable as an heir. Olenna made a surprising request to Leonor. Then let's wait until Marjorie's third child is born. Leonor felt a little thorny. This Thorn Queen was really unpredictable, maybe. But I have a better way. Olenna looked at Leonor. I'm listening. Leonor told Olenna to speak up. Vivian is not suitable to be the heir as a woman, but if she has a prominent partner, then there will be no dispute. Who? Leonor raised his eyebrows slightly. So the highlight is here. Willis's child, my 4-year-old grandson, Levi Tyrell. Olenna proposed a name. What if Marjorie gives birth to a third boy? Leonor also raised a question. The Tyrell family's intentions were completely undisguised. If Levi marries Vivian, will this throne be named Baratheon or Tyrell in the future? Where does Olenna's proposal put the child in Marjorie's belly? If Marjorie gives birth to a third boy, then he is the undisputed heir. Olenna said as a matter of course, but if Marjorie gives birth to another girl, then the future heir must have more Tyrell family blood. Then what about the current situation? Leonor did not answer, but asked about the situation he had mentioned before. If he agreed to Olenna's request, what would he get? The Tyrell family will contribute everything in their reach to the king, but on the condition that my grandson Willis becomes a high knight of the king's guard who can command the army. Olenna directly made an exorbitant demand. That's impossible, madam. I can only leave a maximum of 5 regiments of officer positions for the Tyrell family. Leonor directly rejected. Chapter 137 The Tyrells' Goal. The more than 2,000 years of feudal dynasty history in China and countless power games have verified a truth. In the game of power, everything can be conceded, except for the military power and the purse strings, which must be firmly grasped. Leonor would not agree to Tyrell becoming a high knight, as that would mean 2 Tyrells in his small council. Their power would greatly increase, giving them direct command over their armies, which would be equivalent to handing over military power. He could not tolerate someone else holding the military power, but in the current situation, he could allow the Tyrells to hold a bit of the gun's tail, provided they handed over the purse strings to him. 5 regiments are too few, Olenna said, dissatisfied. Then how many do you want? Leonor asked Olenna how many she wanted. At least give us 25 regiments. Olenna once again made an exorbitant demand. If they couldn't get the position of High Knight, then controlling the military strength of 25 regiments wouldn't be bad either. I only have 30 regiments at hand right now. Leonor rolled his eyes. Giving the Tyrells 25 regiments would be no different from handing over all military power. Then how many can you give us? Olenna threw the question back. Since her words didn't count, then he should give a number himself. If you are willing to hand over your territory to me and allow me to send officials and bishops to govern the territory, I can give you 5 regiments, Leonor said, seeing Olenna's eyes rolling upward in the darkness, and quickly interrupted. Don't rush to refuse. I'm giving you 5 regiments of troops. If you can hand over the territory and finances, then I can reserve 10 regiments for you in the army I establish later, 15 regiments. Olenna, hearing Leonor's allocation method, pondered for a moment and then offered new conditions. The reach, except for the territories belonging to House Tyrell and House Redwine, can all be handed over. Give us 10 regiments of the existing army, and reserve 20 regiments for us in the future army. only 5 from the existing army, and 15 for the future. Highgarden and Arbor must all be given to me. You can keep the land tax, but the officials and bishops must be sent by me." Leonor directly shook his head. 10 regiments from the existing army, 15 regiments for the future. We will be responsible for tax collection, and your majesty can send personnel to station as bishops, Olenna demanded. If House Tyrell has no sincerity, then let's forget about this matter, Leonor immediately rejected. He was joking. Handing over the territory but retaining the power to collect taxes was no different from not handing it over at all. Your majesty, our family has thousands of people. If we hand over all the territory, what will we do in the future? Olenna argued with Leonor, saying that they also needed to eat. I allow you to keep the land tax, so there will be no problem with eating. Your family members can serve as officers in the army later, or they can get stipends. Those who can be soldiers will have stipends, and those who don't can go farming. We are nobles. Your family motto is growing strong. Doesn't that refer to crops? The Greyjoys are the ones who do not sow, and the Greyjoys didn't have a good ending, Leonor warned with a sneer. So strong, Olenna, facing the king whose attitude suddenly became tough, didn't know what to do. Madam, if you are tired, you should go back and rest first, Leonor said, seeing Olenna not speaking, and decided to put the matter aside for now, to give the other party some pressure and himself some buffer. Although he had gained the upper hand in the negotiation, Leonor did not dare to be careless. The two sides were still in the consultation stage, and the Tyrells had only expressed their intention to offer the territory. No one knew if this was true or false. Even if the two sides finally reached an agreement, without completing the final stage, this transaction could not be counted success or failure was uncertain, but the Tyrells proposing this kind of transaction itself had a certain significance and must have been seeking something. If the Tyrells had no sincere intention of trading, then the proposal of this transaction meant that they were testing him, testing whether he had the ambition to unify Westeros. However, their daring to test him in this way represented that they were not repulsed by such ambition, at least having the preparation to pretend to be obedient. Conversely, if the Tyrells sincerely wanted to complete the transaction, then they must also be seeking something, and this request was nothing more than feigned obedience, waiting to pluck the fruit from his hands. In the end, after thinking about both sides of the matter, Leonor overturned this idea again, imagining that the Tyrells did not want to cooperate with him, and all cooperation was an illusion. Well, this was an inevitable ending, but he didn't know to what extent the Tyrells would go. Currently, Olenna herself and Mace were in King's Landing, and Margaery had been living in the Red Keep. Speaking of which, the Tyrells had always been cautious, and they never allowed all family members to appear in one place, to avoid being wiped out in one fell swoop. However, as the family's backbone, Olenna personally came to King's Landing to meet with him, which showed some sincerity. But if that was the case, then what were the Tyrells cooperating with him for? Plucking the fruit was a long-term goal, and they must have a short-term goal as well. Leonor thought back and forth, and suddenly remembered that before this meeting, the Tyrells had just ended their conquest of the High Tower of Old Town. That conquest took the Tyrells 2 full years, which represented what? It represented that the Tyrells also realized that their combat form was not keeping up with the times. Did the Tyrells also realize this? It was precisely because of this that Olenna was so determined to have control of the army. No, the Tyrells' transaction was false, and the demand for military power was also false. Obtaining the model of his army to further improve their army was the truth. Leonor suddenly understood. This should be the Tyrells' real purpose. Just as Leonor was thinking clearly, in the Tower of the Hands in the Red Keep, Olenna returned to Mace with a bad look on her face. Mother, what did you and His Majesty talk about? Mace asked, concerned, facing his mother's gloomy face. Shut your mouth and don't bother me, Olenna scolded directly. If you don't feel comfortable talking to me, perhaps you can talk to Margaery. She has always been smart and is close to His Majesty the King. Mace was not annoyed by his mother's scolding. This was his own mother, and he couldn't get angry. It is precisely because of this that I cannot go to her, as that would embarrass her, Olenna flatly denied. She didn't want to embarrass Margaery, and at the same time, she no longer trusted Margaery, because she had now married into the royal family and had her own interests, and would no longer fully consider the family. But she is still one of our family after all. Mace sighed. Olenna glanced at her chubby eldest son, rolled her eyes slightly, and just shook her head in silence. Chapter 138 The Queen of Thorns. In the flickering candlelight, Olenna's gaze flickered in the shadows. The Queen of Thorns raised her head, only to see the plump Mace still sitting beside her, and couldn't help but sigh. Mace, what is it, mother? The Lord of the Mackerel Court responded to his mother's call. If the Tyrell family perishes because of my decision, Olenna began cautiously. Mother, what are you saying? Mace didn't quite understand his mother's words. I mean, if the Tyrell family perishes because of my decision, will you resent me? Olenna repeated her question. No. Mace's answer was very straightforward. So he trusts me that much? Olenna looked at her foolish son, and couldn't help but feel a little apologetic. Perhaps she had been too harsh on him in the past. We'll all be dead by then. The dead don't resent, Mace added, pouting, not understanding why his mother would bring up such a question. The Queen of Thorns' emotion vanished in an instant, and the expression on her face darkened as she looked at her foolish son. Why did she give birth to such a foolish son? Mother, what's with that expression? Mace was frightened by his mother's expression. Was there something wrong with what he said? The dead certainly don't resent. How will you support me? Olenna rolled her eyes. We'll do whatever you say. Mace puffed out his stomach. We are family, and we will always be together, rooted in this land, thriving endlessly. Don't say such things. It makes me feel like you've become a little smarter, Olenna directly retorted, but in reality, you haven't changed at all. You've just said a few grand words, even though those words make me feel very comfortable to hear. Mace's face turned bitter after being spoken to by his mother, not knowing how to respond. I think being able to say these words is already your limit. Since that's the case, then I'll take a gamble, Olenna sighed. Gamble on what? Mace was still confused. Go prepare my wheelhouse. I'm going back to Highgarden, Olenna requested of Mace. When do we leave? Mace was a little surprised. What was she planning to do? We'll leave tomorrow. What about His Majesty the King? Just tell His Majesty that I'm not feeling well and have returned to Highgarden first. I'll probably be back in a few days, and I'll definitely give him an answer then. Olenna puffed out her cheeks. In any case, she had started this matter and couldn't leave the king without an explanation. Okay, Mace didn't dare to give any instructions regarding his mother's actions and could only nod in agreement. The next day, Olenna left King's Landing early in the morning in her wheelhouse, and Leonor fell into suspicion again after receiving the news. What was this supposed to be, an escape? If she didn't want to face such a question, why did she bring up such a topic? What was the fundamental purpose of doing this? Leonor believed that with Olenna's wisdom, she could completely avoid the sensitive topic of the Tyrell surrender of land, but her raising this matter itself was an indication that the Tyrell family wanted to increase the stakes, and he was happy to take the bet. However, the fact that the other party was hesitating to place their bet was making him very anxious. Should he force the Tyrell family's hand and create a unified public opinion? A thought arose in Leonor's mind, but considering the Stark family in the north, who were eyeing them covetously, and the Martell family in the south, whose intentions were unclear, he had to abandon such a dangerous test. Once the Tyrell family didn't want to take that step, his probing would create some misleading guidance, thereby creating rifts in the otherwise harmonious alliance. He couldn't afford to lose the Tyrell family's balance of power at the moment. To avoid the alliance from falling apart, silently waiting for the Tyrell family's response was the best course of action. Leaving aside Leonor's silent wait, Olenna, on the other hand, returned to Highgarden in her wheelhouse. In the castle where the Tyrell family had resided for generations, the Queen of Thorns gathered the main leaders of the Tyrell family and the Redwyne family and held a secret meeting. Olenna came from the Redwyne family of the Arbor. In her youth, she married Mace's father, Luther Tyrell. Later, after Luther passed away, she gradually integrated the Tyrell and Redwyne families through powerful means and took control of the core power of the Reach. However, she would still seek the opinions of the two families on some matters inside the castle's secret chamber, in front of the round table inlaid with golden roses. Olenna waited for her descendants to arrive and take their seats. Looking at the full room of people, she felt a sense of satisfaction in her heart for Olenna today. Whether it was the Tyrell family or the Redwyne family, all the main leaders of these two families were her descendants. Given time, the future heir to the Iron Throne would also be her descendant. By then, her bloodline would be spread throughout the entire continent of Westeros, like the ubiquitous roses in a garden. Olenna felt a sense of excitement thinking about that scene, but she also knew that it was impossible to fill the land with roses. At the same time, if too many roses bloomed, they would be no different from weeds on the roadside. I have called all of you here today to announce a piece of news. Olenna took a deep breath and looked up at Willis, Garland, and Loras, as well as Paxter of the Redwyne family and others. Grandmother, what do you have to say to us? Willis, with his trimmed beard, stood up and bowed to the eldest Olenna. I plan to hand over all the territories of the Reach to the kingdom. Olenna bluntly stated her plan. What? This can't be done. Hearing Olenna's words, everyone at the table stood up, all with expressions of disbelief, and then whispered to each other, I want to support Margaery, so that she, and the unborn child in her belly, will become the sole future heir to the Iron Throne. Olenna solemnly announced. Wait a moment, Mother. Paxter Redwyne spoke. He was Olenna's nephew and also her son-in-law. I know what you want to say. I only have one sentence. Those who are willing to support me should follow me, and those who are unwilling can leave. I won't force anyone. Olenna waved her hand to stop Paxter's words, only allowing everyone present to make a choice. Chapter 139 Leonor III. Why so resolute? Facing the seemingly ultimatum-like words of the grandmother, the younger generations of House Tyrell and House Redwyne were all stunned, looking at each other, unsure of what to do. Haven't I taught you that decisiveness is important when facing major events? Olenna faced the children who dared not make a decision, feeling a bit angry at their lack of ambition. Was making a choice really that difficult? Mother, decisiveness is important, but when facing major events that concern fate, prudence is equally important. We want to know, why do you have such thoughts? And perhaps, you can tell me, what can we gain by doing this? What necessity do we have to take such a risk? Paxter's freckles danced on his face as he raised a series of questions. You don't need to take such a risk, it's just that I want to take a risk. Olenna gave her orange-haired nephew the most direct response, and after a slight pause, added, if my adventure succeeds, it will allow our family to possess the power to rule this land. What if we don't participate? Paxter asked again. He understood the meaning in Olenna's words, which was essentially to bet everything on Margaery, but the question was, would it be House Tyrell or House Redwyne who gained the power? House Redwyne had no need to take such a risk. If you don't participate, then you don't participate. I will do my best to ensure your power and freedom, Olenna assured Paxter. Then we won't participate. Paxter gave a decisive reply. What about you? Olenna, facing her nephew and son-in-law who decisively withdrew, wasn't too surprised, and turned to look at Willis and the others beside him. Grandmother, what do you need us to do? Willis did not answer directly. Follow me to King's Landing. From today onwards, we will go to the Red Keep and share power with the Baratheons. You three brothers will lead the knights who follow us to join the King's army and learn new command techniques. Our territory will also be directly handed over to the King, to be managed by officials dispatched by the King. Olenna stated her plan. Hearing the Queen of Thorns' words, Garland and Loras hesitated, casting their gazes at their elder brother Willis. All of this for the Tyrells. Willis didn't look at his two brothers, directly bowing in agreement. Growing strong, Olenna responded to her eldest grandson with the Tyrell family motto, then looked at her nephew and son-in-law, Paxter Redwyne, and said, you don't need to worry. Even if you don't participate in this action, you can still exist as our pillar in the outside world. We will guarantee your interests. House Redwyne will always be with House Tyrell. Paxter understood his aunt's intention in assuring him, and also pledged the loyalty of House Redwyne. When Leonor learned in the Red Keep that Olenna had returned, and had even brought Garland and Loras with her, he knew that House Tyrell was serious. However, he had already made his plans. No matter what conspiracy House Tyrell brought, he would accept it all. Now, the most important thing was to gather all the forces that could be gathered with a set goal in mind. Leonor concentrated and began corresponding negotiations with House Tyrell. As the negotiations entered the formal process, time came to the 11th month of the 305th year of Aegon's conquest. On this day, with a crisp cry of a baby, Leonor welcomed his first official male heir. Let's call him Leonor. He will be the second king, named Leonor Baratheon, the sole and legitimate heir to my kingdom. Leonor named the new child, making him the third in the family and the second king, named Leonor Baratheon, designated as the crown prince. With the birth of the true crown prince, the Red Keep was filled with joy, except for Nymelia, my poor child. Nymelia held Beeler, who is already 3 years old, with tears streaming down her face. Margaery had given birth to a boy, and House Tyrell was about to hand over the Reach. Her Beeler had lost his only advantage, Nym. A baron looked at his daughter, who was holding her grandson and weeping, feeling a bit distressed. Nymelia looked up at her father, not saying anything, and directly turned around with the silent Beeler in her arms, turning her back to her father. Nym, you don't need to be like this. Leonor is not a baron tried to comfort Nymelia. I don't want to listen. Nymelia interrupted her father. A baron's consolation. In the past, she never asked for anything from House Martell, But now she was filled with resentment towards House Martell and her father Oberyn, resenting the gap between House Martell and House Tyrell, and resenting her father Oberyn's promiscuity. Mama, little Beeler was held in his mother's arms, looking up at his constantly weeping mother, reaching out to touch her face, wiping away the tears. My darling, Mama is here. Nymelia looked down at the child with his big, twinkling eyes, and the thousands of resentments in her heart turned into love, holding him tightly in her arms. Don't worry, I will definitely make you the heir to the Iron Throne, I promise. Nymelia promised the ignorant Beeler. Nym, you shouldn't be like this, Oberyn couldn't help but say when he heard Nymelia's words. Why let little Beeler join such a cruel struggle? Then what do you want me to do? When Nymelia looked up at her father, she no longer had the admiration of the past, but more indifference. I will definitely give Beeler the best, and not be afraid like you. Afraid? Oberyn was slightly stunned when he heard Nymelia's description, then understood that Nymelia was resenting him for not supporting her like House Tyrell supported Margaery. But she was ultimately a bastard, and only a lover, isn't it? Nymelia asked back. If you could support me like House Tyrell, then Beeler at least wouldn't have to be a bastard like me. Even so, you shouldn't let him compete for the Iron Throne. Oberyn couldn't refute it. He indeed couldn't fully support Nymelia like House Tyrell, but there was no need to let Beeler enter the cruel Iron Throne competition. Does he have a choice? He is born with the blood of a king. This is a battle he cannot avoid. I will not tolerate him being as pitiful as I am in the days to come, Nymelia said decisively. Oberyn, facing his determined daughter, only had regret left in his heart. Chapter 140, King in the North. Oberyn deeply regretted both allowing Nymeria to approach Leonor and his own unrestrained lifestyle. He was unable to provide more support to his Sand Snake daughters and grandchildren, and couldn't even secure legitimate status for them. Leonor, at this moment, had no time to consider the helplessness and grievances of Oberyn and his daughter. He was currently negotiating with the Tyrell family. After round of negotiations, Leonor finally allocated the existing 5 regimental officer positions while promising to provide 7 regimental army positions for the Reach's nobles in the future. In exchange, the Tyrell family would hand over all Reach territories except for the Arbor. Apart from retaining land taxes, all other affairs would be managed by officials and bishops dispatched by Leonor. This deal, rich under the circumstances of Leonor I's birth, greatly advanced the unification process of the Westeros kingdom and promoted Leonor's own strategic vision, thoroughly stabilizing the southern situation and allowing him to free up his hands to deal with the north. The agreed-upon deal was immediately implemented. Leonor reassigned the 5 officer corps formations from the Redwater River direction, allowing Willis, Garland, and Loras Tyrell to serve as officer leaders. The Tyrell family, in turn, dispatched personnel to cooperate with the Reach's governor and bishops appointed by Leonor, beginning to assess the population and land, and implement the kingdom's laws. The Reach had always been a grain-producing area. Successfully possessing this land gave Leonor more population, food, and wealth through the monopoly of salt and iron and the control of grain. Leonor collected a large amount of wealth in the shortest possible time, recruited a large number of troops, and trained 10 more regiments of troops in addition to his original 30 regiments, beginning to sharpen his sword in June of the 306th year of the Conquest era. 3 years after the rebellion of the Stormlands Lords, the continent of Westeros began to stir again. Robb Stark, Duke of Winterfell in the north, used ravens to announce his independence as the king in the north. No longer accepting the rule of the Iron Throne, there wasn't even Stannis' signature. Leonor was slightly surprised by the North's declaration because he discovered that there was nothing related to Stannis, meaning that his rigid older brother had not been involved in this matter. The Starks of the North just declared themselves king so easily, without any reason or demands, just like they were crazy. However, their ravens had already spread the word everywhere, and it couldn't be ignored. At least Leonor, as the king, couldn't ignore it. Let the ravens fly out. Tell everyone, as the king of Westeros, I recognize Robb Stark's kingship, but Westeros cannot accommodate 2 kings. Unless Robb Stark personally kneels before me, removes his crown, and begs for surrender, I will never forgive his betrayal. While Leonor had the Maester's ravens take the declaration to all directions, he mobilized 5 sword regiments with more than 3,200 people, with Randall Tarly as the commander-in-chief, and recruited 300 knights from the Golden Tooth, Crackahall, and Silverhill as auxiliary troops, advancing eastward from the Westerlands to Riverine on the other side. 7 Redwater regiments with more than 4,500 people, with Willis Tyrell as the commander-in-chief, advanced westward along the Red Fork River, cooperating with Randyll Tarly from the west to encircle River and accompanying the actions of the 12 regiments of troops was a long list of bounties. The famous lords and nobles of the Riverlands, as well as those with the title of knight, were all listed on it, with each knight having a bounty of 2 gold dragons, and nobles having different gold dragon bounties depending on the size and wealth of their territories. All levels of lords and knights were clearly priced, and at the same time, military discipline was strictly enforced. Retreating meant death, speaking recklessly meant death, disturbing the people meant death, strictly restraining the army in this situation. The war had no suspense. The lords of the Riverlands didn't even have time to surrender and were all directly swept away. Willis Tyrell's and Randyll Tarly's troops joined forces outside Riverrun, completely surrounding Riverrun while these 12 regiments surrounded Riverrun. Leonor was in Saltpans, with 3 Iron Guard regiments, 3 Redwater regiments, 5 Kingswood regiments, and 3 Storm regiments, a total of 14 regiments with more than 9,000 troops under his command. In addition to the more than 9,000 troops under his command, Leonor also sent people to the east, recruiting 800 wildlings from the Mountains of the Moon as auxiliary troops. With a total force of over 10,000, the bright yellow stag banner fluttered in the wind. Inside the tents, Leonor sat on top, accepting the allegiance of more than a dozen wildling clans from the Mountains of the Moon. Those wildlings knelt before Leonor, cutting their palms with short daggers and smearing blood on their foreheads, swearing in the name of our ancestors. Great Leonor, you are a master, and your enemies are our enemies. Kawawa, clad in iron armor, swore with the blood on his forehead, I have received your oath, free folk from the Mountains of the Moon. From today onwards, you are free folk of my kingdom, protected by the laws of my kingdom. Whoever discriminates against you is my enemy. Leonor solemnly responded to the oath of Kawawa, and the other wildlings faced with Leonor's words. The heads of the wildling clans all knelt and kowtowed. They received far more than just the status of free folk, but also permission to obtain trade privileges for iron products, grain, and other goods. The wildlings were descendants of the first men. They were ostracized by the Andals for not believing in the 7 gods. The Andals forbade them from obtaining ironware and farming techniques and drove them into the deep mountains and north of the wall, making them more and more barbaric. Leonor lifted the ban on them at the cost of the wildling clan's submission, which aroused dissatisfaction from ministers such as Agassi and Gladden, who believed in the 7 gods. The minister of war, Gladden, was dissatisfied, but even more puzzled, and complained to Leonor in private, My Majesty, they are just a group of wildlings. We do not lack these hundreds of warriors. Accepting them will only make the East angry. Subduing the wildlings of the Mountains of the Moon seemed simple, but in reality, it was of great importance, not only arousing the dissatisfaction of the followers of the 7 gods and the Andal nobles, but also stimulating the East. If they are dissatisfied, then we won't do it. Leonor asked rhetorically, with a contemptuous tone, and then said, It is precisely because of their dissatisfaction that the light of the 7 gods has not been able to shine on the world. Do you want those wildlings to convert to the 7 gods? Countless devout believers in the past wanted to do this, but they all failed without exception. Gladden shook his head more simply when he heard Leonor's words. The wildlings couldn't be tamed. In your eyes, what are the 7 gods? Leonor didn't care about Gladden's words, but instead asked a question. The 7 gods are the 7 gods. Gladden was not a fool, so he naturally knew that there was something in Leonor's words, but his answer was also very simple. The 7 gods were the 7 gods in the mainstream of Westeros. Faith was not a sustenance, but a proof of distinguishing civilization from barbarism. The Andals who converted to the 7 gods were civilized. The first men who believed in the old gods were civilized, and those who did not believe in any gods were wildlings, beasts like horses. The 7 gods are more than just the 7 gods. Leonor inwardly sneered at Gladden's words, but still patiently explained to him, the right to interpret the 7 gods could not be given to others. He was the king certified by the 7 gods. Your Majesty, you? Gladden was a little speechless. All right, no need to say more. Has the envoy I sent to the east returned? Leonor shook his head in his heart when he saw that the explanation didn't work. Since teaching people doesn't work, then use events to teach people. The lords of the east refused to send troops on the grounds that you recruited wildlings. Robb Stark has already led the northern army across the Twins. Gladden could only answer the question in a muffled voice, seeing that Leonor was going his own way. Chapter 141 Room. The Andals were the second group of humans to arrive in Westeros. Unlike the first men, who came to the continent via the Arm of Dorne, they sailed to the fingers of Westeros and then conquered the Vale of Arryn. From the Vale of Arryn, They slowly spread to every piece of land in southern Westeros. The nobles of the Vale of Arryn are the Andals with the purest bloodline in Westeros today, and even though times have changed, they are still proud of it as the Andals with the purest bloodline. The Vale nobles have a natural contempt for the wildlings and disdain to associate with them. For this reason, they refused Lionel's summons, and it would not be surprising if they threw themselves into the arms of the North. Not surprising, Lionel said with a dismissive look upon hearing Graden's reply. He was still stationed in Saltpans, mainly to test the attitude of the Vale. He was prepared to fall out with the Vale, but the fellows in the Vale only refused the summons, seemingly wanting to sit on the fence and watch the fire from the other side, unwilling to commit until absolutely necessary. Your Grace, what if the Vale sides with the Dairoth? Graden couldn't help but ask. He always thought it unwise for Lionel to take in the wildlings, as it might push the lords of the Vale towards House Stark. Graden, my lord, please put this matter aside for now, Lionel said, somewhat annoyed that Graden was still harping on the subject. I have already taken in those wildlings. You can't expect me to kill them all, of course not, but before you did this, could you have thought about the consequences? Graden asked with a hint of reproach. At this point, banishing or killing the accepted wildlings would damage the king's prestige. Then help me think of a solution. Isn't that the meaning of your existence? Lionel said with a playful tone. Graden opened his mouth. You don't have any good ideas, Lionel drawled. I'm sorry, your Grace, Graden said with a look of shame. He didn't have a good solution to the current situation either. Alright, Lionel thought to himself with a sneer, seeing Graden like this. This master of arms has some vision, but not much ability, just like most maesters. Can't count on him. Since Lionel couldn't count on Graden, he personally summoned the envoy sent to the Vale, inquired about the Vale's response, and sent scouts near the Bloody Gate to monitor the movements of the Vale's army there before the army officially departed from Saltpans. Lionel was not worried about the Vale turning against him. He had left himself plenty of room to maneuver. The Vale is called the Vale because its overall terrain is a natural basin, with the area as its core and surrounded by mountains on all sides. Only a road through the mountains of the moon connects the inside and outside, making it a place where one man can hold a pass, and 10,000 cannot pass. In the past, the lords of the Vale defended against foreign enemies by guarding the Bloody Gate on this road. As long as they closed the Bloody Gate and didn't come out, no one could get in. But conversely, if the Bloody Gate was blocked, no matter how many troops were inside, they couldn't get out, unless the Vale lords' armies each had a dragon. Lionel carefully measured the width of the Bloody Gate passage. After calculation, he only needed 2 regiments to block the army inside the Vale. And the remaining 12 regiments would be enough. While Lionel was making various calculations in Saltpans and waiting for an opportunity, the 12 regiments led by Vilas and Randall were helpless against Reborn. Reborn is located at the intersection of the Red Fork and the Tumblestone River. It is a triangular city, surrounded by water on 2 sides. The side without water has been artificially dug out into a moat and equipped with sluice gates. As soon as someone attacks, the gates are opened immediately, and the entire city becomes an island. As an island-type city, Reborn is even more difficult to attack than the Vale. After all, the 2 sides of this triangular city are wide rivers, making it impossible to set up scorpion crossbows or catapults. The only side that can be approached has a huge moat, making it impossible to break through. Since they couldn't break through, they could only besiege the city, but besieging the city was also more difficult than imagined, because Reborn could almost be considered surrounded by water on 3 sides. The Red Fork and the Tumblestone River were too long, and Vilas and Randall couldn't possibly block the water flow. The people in Reborn could easily pass through the outer encirclement by simply rowing a boat. Vilas and Randall couldn't capture Reborn, and the people in Reborn didn't fight back either. They didn't have the ability to face more than 7,000 strong men, so they sent a raven to Winterfell for help overnight. House Tully of Reborn and House Stark of the North were so close that they would, implying they are extremely close. The current Duke of Reborn, Edgemere Tully, is not only Robb Stark's uncle but also his brother-in-law, as he married a daughter of House Frey of the twins. Robb Stark of Winterfell did not hesitate after receiving the raven from Reborn. He directly marched south in the name of aiding Reborn, even saving the time to summon vassals and troops, because he had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and the northern lords had also been waiting for this moment for a long time. The north is bitterly cold. Before Aegon's conquest of Westeros, the northerners would go south in droves to plunder every winter. After Aegon's conquest of Westeros, the northerners could no longer carry out large-scale plunder, but there would still be large groups of civilians traveling south together, because even vagrancy in the south could provide a way to survive, while staying in the north only meant death. Although the north has not yet received the White Raven from the Citadel, they have calculated that they have passed more than a dozen spring, summer, and autumn years. The later the winter comes, the more severe it will be. The severity of this winter will far exceed previous ones. If they want to survive, they must store enough supplies and wealth. And where do these supplies and wealth come from? They can only go south to rob. It was under this psychological drive that the Northern Lords instigated Robb Stark to declare himself king. Robb Stark himself was not as righteous as his father, but he still respected existing traditions to some extent. He originally wanted to raise Stannis' banner and have Stannis crown him king, but unfortunately, Stannis was unwilling to lend him his banner, leaving him to crown himself. Even after ascending the throne, Robb Stark did not immediately march south. He kept delaying until Reborn was besieged. He believed that the time had come, so he immediately led the gathered northern vassals and troops to march south, intending to unite Reborn in the name of rescue and then kill into the wealthy areas to carry out looting. Robb Stark led his army south, and his first stop was the Twins, where his father-in-law Valder Frey was located. His wife, Rosalind, gave birth to a son for him 2 years ago, but the child died not long after birth. After he ascended the throne as king in the north this time, he made his brother Brandon his heir, which strained his relationship with House Frey, but Valder Frey still welcomed him. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.